I want to start by asking you a question this morning. How many have a story, maybe as a child, of you running away from home? That you ran away from home. You know, your mom didn't cut the crust off your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and because of it, it was a disappointment. So what you did is you went into your bedroom and you packed up your toys, and then you ventured out the front door and you thought, well, I'm now on the run. And you head out to your tree house, and there you are. You stake out for the day or around your playground area, and you think that you've done up and left the house. But as the day gets going and as the day is drawing to a close and your belly starts to rumble, you begin to think to yourself, it wasn't too bad at home. So you make your way back indoors. All the time your mom thinking they were just out in the backyard playing, but in your thoughts, you ran away from home. You know, I know that there are some funny stories that we could all share this morning about running away from home in a childlike manner, but there are also some who've experienced some very tragic stories in your life because you really did it. You really stepped away from home and you moved. You left home. You left your mom. You left your dad. You left not knowing what was coming next. You were convinced that things would be better, only discovering how hard that life would be and how wrong those moments were because it was filled with mistakes and failures. It was filled with regrets, a life that starts and still really hurts as you think about it today, the choices that you make. Well, this morning isn't so much about a childhood runaway moment. However, I do want to take some time to talk about the decisions that people make when they choose to run away from their spiritual home, to run away from God, to run away from their faith and everything familiar. You know, in Luke chapter 15, Jesus shared a few stories that address the idea of running away, or we could say lost in a life of their making. He spoke about in that particular chapter the lost sheep. He talked about the lost coin. And then he finished out that chapter by talking about the prodigal son. The prodigal son. Well, this Easter, I want us to dwell on that last half of that chapter as we talk about the prodigal son and the story that we can learn from that moment. Well, in this story, Jesus talks about a father. The father represents God, and the sons in the story represent us. Look at Luke chapter 15, verses 11 and 12. It says, "And he, Jesus, said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that is coming to me.' And so he divided his wealth between them." Now it's clear in the story that the father was a very wealthy man, that the father had money that would one day at his death be distributed or divided among the 2 sons that he had. But the younger son didn't want that day. He didn't want to wait until that day. He wanted what was coming to him in the now. Now, in that culture in which Jesus shared this story, the son's request is actually seen as disrespectful. It's seen as very immature of him to want what his father had before the time was right, with some interpreting the son's actions as an expression of hatred, implying that his desire was for his son's death in that moment. Yet in spite of his request, yet in spite of what he was asking his dad to do that particular day, his father agreed and gave each son his share, with verse 13 saying this, "And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey to a distant country." We'll stop there. You see, this was more than the son leaving. This was the son forsaking all that his dad, his father, had taught him. It was everything his father represented was being put on display, set aside in his life, not wanting to do or follow his dad's leading. Again, the father representing God and the son representing those who run from God. Well, as I think about that story today, why do people run from God? Why do they run from God? Well, some people run from God because God's guardrails feels like restrictions. They feel like punishment. They don't want limits in their life. They don't want rules in their life. They avoid the disapproval of others by doing just that. And those rules don't apply to me. If they don't, then I won't be a disappointment to someone. If I can separate myself from what God wants, if I can separate myself from what He demands of me, as long as I'm not doing them, then I can live my own life. And the people who are looking at me will say, well, they can't be disappointed because I'm not following those rules anyway. Some people run because they want to prove they don't need anyone or need anything. They want to chart their own path, or they want to go their own way. They want to live their own life, not being directed by God. Some people run because disappointment with people leads to anger towards God. Now, we can call this misplaced anger, if you will. People hurt me, and angry people are perceived to represent God. How many have left faith? How many people have walked away from God simply because people of faith, or people who believe in God, or those who are known as disciples of God, they treated me wrong or said something wrong, even though that they're infallible, fallible. We're all fallible, right? We all have our problems. We all do wrong things that it impacts our lives. But runaways say, because that person has treated me wrong, especially believers, I don't want to associate with the God that they say that they know. So they pull away. You know, some people run because of a poor relationship choices. A person who doesn't follow God will never lead you toward God. Did you know that? When you follow them long enough, you won't recognize your surroundings. Because if you show me your friends, I can show you your future. Because you're always going to lean in the direction that they're leading. Some people run because it's easier to run than to face the results of failure. I messed up in my life, so I don't feel like there's a place for me here. The fear of rejection, which only causes them to flee rejection. Because I cannot be accepted, because I've messed up so much, therefore I pull away, I run away, because I'm really running from the rejection portion. Some people run because of addiction. They're no longer in control. Some people run out of habit. It's what they've done their whole lives. They've never experienced the alternative of actually staying. Why? Because it's all they've ever known. Modeled by their friends and modeled by their family. Instead of allowing the roots to go deep and allowing themselves to stay somewhere rooted and grounded, they would rather run than actually stay. You know, some people run because they're lonely. It's not that they're running from something, but they think they're running to something. What they don't have seems way better than what they do have. So they run in hopes of finding something which never really appears in their lives. It never shows up. Whatever the reasons, whether it be those or whether it be some other reason, it's easy to predict the end result of leaving. Because when you run, you leave. And when you leave the safety of home. You see, when you run from God, you remove yourself from His protection. It's not that God chooses to quit protecting you. You just choose, you refuse His protection when you walk away from Him. No longer under His care, but now choosing your own path. You know, when you leave the security of home. This is more than just feeling safe. It's the loss of a sense of belonging, a place that we call home, a place that we are familiar with. You know, as a pastor, the Lord has given me a wonderful opportunity to visit different countries around the globe. It's through missions work that I've been able to put my foot on some places that I probably would have never been able to do not following the Lord. And many people who have been on mission trips have said that to me. Pastor, I would have never been able to do this in the old life which I live, but because of following Jesus, I've had this opportunity. I've had the privilege of being in Africa, in India, in Ecuador, in Colombia, and Peru, yet no matter how friendly or how helpful the nationals were there, no matter how kind they were to me, it was never home. It was never home. It was only when the plane touched back down in the U.S. You know what I'm talking about? When it set back down in the U.S. and you know that your home is where I felt like I belong. with my family and with my church and with my community. There's a sense of security and there's a sense of belonging when you get back home. Oh, the embrace is good when you get home, isn't it? You wrap your family up and you hold them tight. There's a sense of belonging when you walk back in the door. You know, when you leave, you leave the blessings of home as well. My daughters are all grown, with one living in a new city, and occasionally there's 2 others who are going to college. But unlike living away, there are blessings at home. And you parents, you know what I'm talking about. Your kids walk up in your house and open your refrigerator and they get what they want, right? They never ask you. They just take the drinks out and they eat your sandwiches and they eat your food. But there's blessings in your home. That light bill, that gas bill, you know, the food bill, all of that is free to them when they come to your home. They partake of that freely. Why? Because there's blessings that they find there. But to live outside of my home is to understand the loss of blessings and the weight of carrying those burdens on your own. There's nothing like having the blessings of home. We can enjoy them when we live there. You know, when you leave also the love of home. You see, let me be careful in this point because God will always love you. He will always love you. His love toward you is inexpressible, the Bible says, and full of glory. However, when you run, when you leave, you're just not there to experience it. Because when you walk away from Him, again, what does the story tells us? The Father represents God. The sons represent us who walk away from the Father. And if we choose to walk away from the Father, if we choose to go our own direction, our own way, then we're not there to experience the love of the Father in what we call home with Him. You see, there's nothing like having His love. You see, when you leave home, you leave so much. What is life without the safety, security, and blessings and love of home? Yet when you continue to run, the consequences continue. Let's go back to verse number 13 again and finish the verse. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey to a distant country. That's where we stopped. But what does it say at the end? And there he squandered his estate in wild living. You know, it wasn't too long that the younger son's journey that he lost everything. And it was predictable because when you run from God, you make bad decisions. You do things that you never thought that you would do. Not that you were planning on making stupid decisions along the way. No one ever wants to make stupid decisions or dumb decisions. It's just one of the consequences when you run. He squandered everything. He lost everything. You know, some lose money. Some lose their families. Some lost their marriages. Some lost their jobs and their careers. Some lost business. Some lost friends. Some lost their innocence. Some their reputation. The story is always about how much is lost when you think about a runaway moving away from home, running from something, running from a place that loves him so well. Because when you run from God, you lose. The devil will see to it. When you run from God, your plans will fail. Look at verse number 14. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country and he began doing without. Now, think about it. He had already experienced a loss of everything that he came to this new place with. Everything that his father had granted him, he brought it and it was lost. Nothing left. But while he was there in that place, there was a famine that came along. There was something else that came into his life, and it says here that he began to do without. It doesn't matter how much you may prepare. It doesn't matter how much you give thought into where you're going. It's impossible to see the dangers that are ahead of you. Every runaway thinks that his or her story will be different, that it's going to be great, that everything's going to be fine, only to find out that it's really not when you run away. You see, being pregnant wasn't part of the plan. Being broke, I didn't count on that. Being addicted wasn't a part of the plan. Being lonely wasn't a part of the plan. I never planned it that way when I set out to leave my home. I never planned it that way when I decided to leave my family, my father who loved me and cared for me. I never planned it that way. In that place, some people blame God. But I want you to know today that God didn't do that to you, whatever that is. He didn't do that. Look at the pattern in the story that Jesus was teaching. Consequences follow disobedience. Consequences follow disobedience. When we disobey, there is something that happens. When you walk away from the love and the protection and all that God brings to us, when He simply wants us to stay within His house, when we choose to walk away from all of that, you're choosing to put yourself in a situation that you encounter all that the enemy wants to bring your way. Write this down. There's a connection between what's happening in your life and what you've decided about God. There's a connection between what's happening in your life and what you've decided about God. You may plan everything out, but life without God goes unplanned. It happens. But when God is in control, when you allow God to lead your path, He helps through those moments, through those unprepared things that happen. We can lean into Him instead of being alone through them, because they're going to come. How many have seen some unplanned things hit your home before? Come on. I have. It's hit my house. But I'm glad I can lean into my Father instead I have to face them alone. You see, when you run from God, you end up embarrassed and ashamed. You know, sometimes shame is the biggest hurdle for a runaway. I'd come home, but what will people think? I've heard that many times. I'd come home, but what are they going to think about what I did? What are they going to think about where I've been? What are they going to think? What will they say? I want to encourage you this morning to don't let guilt or shame keep you from coming home. Don't allow the enemy to plant that seed in your mind to say, what are people going to think? See, people who are genuine followers of Jesus will celebrate you. They're going to love you. They're going to care for you. They're going to welcome you home. But when you run from God, you end up alone. That's where you end up. Where was the crowd that helped him spend all the money? Has anybody ever asked that question in the prodigal son story? Where was the people at that helped him spend it? Where were those individuals at? He was alone at the end of the story. They were nowhere to be found. The younger son was alone. Maybe you find yourself in the same place, asking the question, what can I do? Verse 17 says this, read this. But when he came to his senses, I think this is my favorite part in that whole story that Jesus was teaching. When he came to his senses. See, the journey home starts with recognizing where your life is today. Where are you today? You have to somehow shake yourself and realize where you are in the situations that you're in. How many broken relationships is it going to take? How much do you have to lose? How many bad decisions do you have to make? How many plans have to fail in your life? When I read this story simply shouts to you and to me, it's time to come home. No matter how far you've gone, no matter how long it's been, you can always come home. It's never too late to come home. It's never too late to come home. You know, some may have the fear of what will God say. But I'm so glad that Jesus included the Father's reaction to the Son's decision in this particular story. Look at verse 20 with me. He said, so he set out and came to his father. He came to his senses while he was sitting in that pig pen, while he was slopping, realizing no money left, my friends have left me, and now the famine has hit and everything is gone. There's no hope here, and I found this job, slopping pigs. And he came to his senses. And he made his way back to his father. Verse 20. But when he still he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. Can you see the love of the Father in that one verse? It brings me to tears. As he was probably standing on the porch every day, looking out on the rising, waiting for his son's silhouette to show up. Just waiting and watching for him to come home. You see, that's what God will do, because he's the Father in the story. In church, that's what we will do. Throw our arms around you and simply say, welcome home. You see, Easter reminds us not of a son running from a father, but a father running toward his children. The Easter story is about God's relentless pursuit of us. The story of Jesus, who willingly left the safety and the security and the glory of heaven to come to earth, not because he was running from his Father, but because we did. See, on the third day, Jesus rose from the grave, conquering sin and death, proving once and for all there's no distance too far for God's love to reach. It's the empty and the open tomb that is a declaration for every single runaway. You can come home. You can come home because the door is open. The Father is watching and the Father is waiting. And Easter is your invitation just to stop running. Just to stop trusting in what you think. The desires that you have. You can stop running and simply come home. The resurrection is your assurance that you don't have to stay in the pig pen. You don't have to live with shame. You don't have to live with regret. You don't have to live in emptiness. But you can simply come home. What a beautiful story for you and me today. That no matter where our life is, whether we're the ones who have left and are gone, whether we're the individual who have walked away from the Lord and we find ourselves in that metaphoric pig pen today, or whether we've walked away from Him in a situation or a circumstance, or whether we have declared in our mind that in this area of my life, I'm not going to trust my Father anymore. I'm going to do my own thing. We can come home. And God is calling us home. That's what Easter is all about. We can come home. So if you would you stand with me today?